Right, I hope this is going to work. And it is our pleasure to welcome Juliette Issartel, who is
Hello.
a hello Juliette, who is a PhD candidate from La Sorbonne Nouvelle, and she's actually supervised by Romain Garbaille. The title of the thesis in French is This is England, la performance de la marginalité noire à travers le grime. This is England, the performance of black marginality through grime, I guess, in English. Am I right? Good.
Yes.
And today, and so she's currently a teaching postgraduate student at Aix-Marseille Université. She's been, I think, there since September.
Yeah.
And today her talk is entitled Dave and Lowkey, When Grime Music Meets British Politics. Right? So over to you, Juliette.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. So my presentation will be focused on the political involvement of two grime artists, which are Dave and Lowkey. Dave coming from what is called the second wave of grime, and Lowkey from the first wave. And it will aim to show how grime has evolved from a reflection of social realities in East London to a vehicle for political expression in contemporary Britain. More specifically, I will examine how both artists use their music to critique UK home policies, including, for example, austerity, policing, social inequalities, and immigration, rather than foreign policy issues. And by doing so, I aim to highlight how grime has become a cultural and political platform for young and often marginalized voices within British society. So I will start by briefly introducing grime for those who are not familiar with this genre of music. So in 2003, grime MC Dizzy Rascal was the first grime artist to win the prestigious Mercury Prize, which was awarded to him for his debut album, Boy in the Corner, which had been released the same year, a bit earlier. This event marked a new turn for the emerging musical genre, as it was recognized by a relatively mainstream awards. British rap was heavily influenced by American hip-hop after Sugar Hill Gang's hit track Rapper's Delight made it to the British charts soon after its release in 1979. But Black British music, and grime in particular, was primarily influenced by African and Caribbean cultures, and grime finds its roots in reggae and electronic dance music such as jungle and garage, which are sounds characterized by percussive rhythms and the use of samples. So sonically, grime was unprecedented and characterized by a fast 140 BPM, meaning beat per minute, and its use of spatial electronic sounds known as Afrofuturism, a notion defined by British journalist and book writer Dan Hancock as, I quote, the African diasporic aesthetic that takes science fiction as a tool for discussing oppression and freedom. So after debates about what to name this new genre, debates represented in grime's godfather Wiley's hit track, What Do You Call It?, released in 2004, the term grime was coined by journalists and adopted by MCs in the genre's early days as a reflection of East London's deprivation, in which grime's creators developed this innovative, gritty, and never-heard-before sound. However, grime was always more than just a different sound or a derivative from previous genres of Black British rap music. Created in the early 2000s by groups of Black British teenagers in East London's most deprived boroughs. It emerged and soon became a reflection of the social, economic, and cultural conditions of the area. And more than representing the East End's underdog mentality, marginality, and poverty, grime appealed to more positive aspects of life in this area, as it incarnated mutual aid, localism, and community strength, groups of teenagers willing to escape a life in the margins of British society. Black music, such as jazz, reggae, and of course grime, is often a reflection of society, as it intimately combines the sublime and violence in its aesthetics, and the history of Black experience is politicized within its diverse sounds and lyrical content. As argued by Paul Gilroy, forms of Black musical expression have had an almost philosophical doctrine and morality that confronts power with the truth. On the one hand, Black music acts as a means of communication, as it allows artists to raise their voices about their struggles. And on the other hand, it raises consciousness about these issues. So in this way, Grime is both an art form and a culture, or a subculture, with distinctive political and social claims. Grime is a music genre that is political in itself. It's a platform for artists to raise their voices about the issues faced by their communities regarding a number of subjects such as poverty, violence, racism, or police harassment. The very environment that gave birth to Grime, which is London's East End, gave the genre a vocation to become the political voice for Black British youths that felt marginalized from mainstream politics. Using electronic sounds that are deeply marked by an African diasporic culture, these youth started making the grime boroughs visible from the outside and united as a community bound for their common experience of life in the inner city. Even if MCs were not consciously taking a political stand, the very creation of grime speaks loudly about the conditions of life in a city centre far from the image of London that is shown to tourists, upper and upper middle classes in Britain, and far from wealth and gentrified neighbourhoods. They stood as observers of the daily life in their environments, thus clearly showing the audience the hard truth about the areas they grew up in. Artists used grime as a form of resistance to marginalization, but also as a claim of London's multicultural nature that sometimes couldn't be further from traditional views and representations of the British capital. The violence of grime lyrics has often been decried, but it became a cathartic experience for Black British youths to express the daily violence they face in impoverished neighbourhoods and to reflect the violence of the government's social policies that neglected such areas. Grime MCs used their art to depict and denounce the conditions of life in the boroughs they lived in, thus developing a social critique of London and more globally of England, especially the areas they claimed had been left out of government's social and urban policies by the successive urban renewal programs put in place by Margaret Thatcher in the 80s and furthered by her successors up until Tony Blair's New Labour programme of urban regeneration in the early 2000s. However, these rappers did not stop at a mere social involvement, but they pushed the voice they gained to expose real political claims, often going completely against various fields of government policies. This involvement in political spheres plays an important part in showing Grime's evolution to an entire culture that gave artists and their communities, and went as far as defending people from other continents sometimes, a real political platform. It is all the more important to develop this aspect of the genre as political involvement was not restricted to the first wave of grime artists, the first wave being from the early 2000s up until the late 2000s, and the second wave started around 2014 and lasted until 2019. So it was not restricted to the first wave of grime artists, but was shared by more recent MCs who used the musical evolution of the genre to develop their music, but also their way of thinking and of constructing critical songs that would touch the audience they gained when the genre shifted to a more mainstream tone. Artists from Dizzy Rascal, Kano, and Lowkey, which are from the first wave, to Dave and Stormzy from the second wave, used their songs to go from a social report of the deprivation and inequalities of the grime boroughs to openly voicing critical points of views against British monarchy and imperialist history, Brexit and racism, making the voice of an entire generation heard not only to denounce their position in society, but to deconstruct the entire way this society was impacting millions of lives across the United Kingdom. Since the birth of the genre, grime artists have used their sound to develop a more and more constructive political discourse. It started with social involvement at the beginning of the 21st century. MCs wrote and performed grime songs to provide an account of, denounce and escape harsh conditions of life in London's inner city. that grew to become more openly political, with artists not stopping at a simple account of their daily struggles anymore. Starting from a position of organic intellectual as defined by Monique Charles, they became modern politicians, sometimes by inserting light political references in their lyrics, and sometimes by writing songs that could be used and analyzed as complete political speeches. And just as political parties, the more audience they gained, the more powerful their messages became, contributing in engraving grime in British music history because of its sonic particularities, but also because of the impact it made in other spheres of British culture and society. So when thinking about this political involvement in grime music, two artists come to mind. Even though a number of rappers used music to express political claims, Lowkey and Dave pushed this phenomenon beyond simple rebellion against the government. They identified issues that, in their opinion, did not serve the interests of an important part of the British population, mainly the working class and ethnic minorities, and dedicated a number of entire songs to their claims. I chose to focus on these two artists not because they are the only ones whose songs can be compared to political speeches, they are not, but because the first one, Lowkey, comes from Grime's first wave, while the sonic elements of Dave's songs are influenced by old school grime, but are parts of Grime's second wave that developed in the mid-2010s. They each represent a part of Grime's musical history and use the particularities of each wave to construct political messages that would be heard by millions of listeners in the United Kingdom and abroad. So the first song I will analyze is Lowkey's Dear England, released in 2011. In that song, Lowkey raps over typically grime 140 BPM, but he alternates between fast and slower flows. The song features Syrian-born and London-raised artist Mai Khalil, with whom Lowkey collaborated on a number of songs. The 5-minute song is a burning denunciation of Lowkey's surroundings and more generally of the way the United Kingdom rules over its subjects. Lowkey raps about, I quote, the violent tyrannical system he lives in, criticizing the monarchy, the government, the police and the media, and above all, he denounces a society ruled by money and consumption rather than social justice and humanity. Sonically, the song has Grime's typical 140 BPM, but other elements nuance the urgency and fastness of the genre. The song starts by almost 1 minute of vocals by Mai Khalil, then her voice over a synthesizer reminding violin sounds. And when Lowkey starts to rap, most of his verses are slow and delivered in an almost childlike manner, emphasizing the sadness of the lyrics. I wanted to play an excerpt from that song, but it's not working at the moment. I will provide the links to every song I mentioned so that if you're interested, you can go listen to them.
Yes, I think you may want to try just in case.
I can try, yeah, I can try.
Yeah, let's try.
Yeah, and let me know if that works. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So I'll start sharing.
Really sorry about the shift to Big Blue Button. I mean, something we didn't want really, but
yeah.
got to put up with it, unfortunately.
I'll try for just a few seconds and then ask you if you can hear, and then I'll keep playing if you can. Can you hear?
No.
No, yeah.
Pretty
I'm
much
so sorry, but I will provide all the links to the music videos I'm mentioning and the songs I'm mentioning so that you can go listen to them. So that song was written in the context of the 2011 riots in London following the shooting of Mark Duggan by the police, when cities across England saw the proliferation of looting and arson that necessitated the intervention of police forces and ended with the death of 5 people. In this context, Lowkey writes to, I quote, "Just relax as we slip into fascism and the fear gets drilled into your hearts, but remember these children are all ours," end quotes. He denounces the role of the media in forcing fear into people's minds because of the overwhelming coverage it gave to the riots, and in particular to the criminal behavior of a minority of protesters. He also incentivizes his audience to, again, I quote, "remember these children are all ours," as the government then condemned a big part of Britain as, again, I quote, "the sick society" during the riots. But Lowkey insists on the fact that these people are still supposed to be served and protected by the police and the government. A few years later, so in 2017, Dave released his song Question Time, in which he uses the 7-minute song to undertake the role of a journalist, questioning successive prime ministers about their role in a number of crises at home and abroad. Again, I will here only focus on the issues regarding home policies. This role playing is made very clear in the music video, which unfortunately I cannot show you, where Dave pushes a camera in a television studio set and sits on the set with his notes, just like a political interviewer would. The focus of the entire video is on Dave's face, sometimes standing in front of a background made of television screens showing short clips of various events, such as the voting polls at the time of the Brexit referendum, Black Lives Matter protests in London, views of the parliament, crowded hospitals. So in the entire song, he questions political decisions and highlights the state, for example, of the NHS and of the UK after Brexit. On another occasion, he released a song that could be compared to a modern political speech, this time focusing on immigration policies in the United Kingdom. Three Rivers opens with a verse about the Windrush generation and the treatment they received once they reached England, the country that needed them as cheap manual labor. I quote, "Imagine a place where you raise your kids. The only place you live says you ain't a Brit. They're deporting our people and it makes me sick because they were broken by the country that they came to fix." So the entire song critiques the UK's treatment of immigrants and asylum seekers in the UK. And he goes on to argue that the United Kingdom relies on migration more and more, particularly at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, as immigrants occupy the majority of key worker positions, but they were constantly policed by the British population, government, and police. According to the government's official citing, there were 29,456 applications for asylum in 2020, 29% of which from the Levant, making them the largest part of asylum seekers. The conditions of asylum seeking, especially during the pandemic, were worsened from already low standards. As argued by Dave, most Levantine asylum seekers ran away from their homes. Again, I quote his song, "You run away with your kids so you can give them a chance, but your asylum has got you in a different war." End quote. So they ran away from their homes to the Calais jungle in France, from where they attempt to either stow away on lorries, trains, ferries, cars, or make the journey across the channel or using small boats. 2020 research carried out by the Institution of Race Relations discovered that 292 people had died from 1999 to 2020, making this journey. From there, Dave criticizes the hypocrisy of some members of parliament who themselves came from immigration but did not accept asylum seekers in England. Again, I quote, "Surely you would want to give your people chances that were better than yours. No." In the last part, I will develop anti-racist activism in Grime, again focusing on Grime, on Dave's work. So in 2019, he released the first extracts of his album Psychodrama, the song Black. This song is both a celebration of the Black diaspora and of Black culture, and a strong denunciation of anti-Black racism. I quote, "Look, Black is beautiful, Black is excellent, Black is pain, Black is joy, Black is evident. It's working twice as hard as the people you know you're better than, because you need to do double what they do so you can level them." During his 2020 performance at the Brit Awards, Dave added a verse to this already politically charged song to call out Boris Johnson on what he considered to be racist behaviors and the British media on their poor treatment of Meghan Markle, whose stories regularly made the tabloid headlines, compared to the royal treatment they gave to Kate Middleton, when writing about her. He ends this half verse, half speech by advocating for more equality and better treatment of ethnic minorities in the country, claiming that, I quote, "We still need support for the Windrush generation, reparations for the time our people spent on plantations." And during that performance at the Brit Awards, so he adds a verse to the song, directly looks into the cameras when he's calling out the Prime Minister, which made the moment very powerful. And I wish I could be showing it to you right now. But again, I will send the link to the video. And it's already time for the conclusion, because I wanted to develop a bit more when I showed you the clips, which I can't. So I'm afraid it's going to be a bit shorter than it was supposed to. And I'm sorry about that, but it will leave more time for discussion afterwards. So to conclude this presentation, the political involvement of grime artists such as Lowkey and Dave highlights the genre's evolution from a reflection of social realities in East London to a genuine instrument of political participation. Both artists reveal how the boundaries between music and politics have blurred in the United Kingdom. Through their lyrics, they act as commentators, critics, and ultimately political voices for those excluded from formal arenas of power. Lowkey uses the raw urgency of first-wave grime to denounce institutional corruption and social decay from within his community's lived experience. Dave, emerging from a later generation, redefines political artistry for a broader audience, one that expects musicians to engage thoughtfully with social issues. While Lowkey exposes the structural inequalities at the core of British governance, Dave channels them through personal narrative, empathy, and moral questioning, illustrating how grime has matured from protest to persuasion. By turning everyday injustices into powerful artistic statements, both artists show that grime's true legacy lies not only in its sound, but also in its capacity to shape political consciousness. Through rhythm, wordplay, and truth-telling, grime has become one of Britain's most vital forms of modern political expression, a space where the nation's most marginalized voices are finally heard. Thank you for listening to me. And if I may add just one thing, Dave released an album a week ago in which everything I say is very well illustrated as well. Every song is really charged with social and political messages, and I would really advise you to listen to it if you're interested. Thank you, everyone. And again, I'm really sorry it's a bit shorter than expected.
It's not your fault. It's austerity policies in French academia, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to save money, so stopping to pay for the Zoom license here at Toulouse Jean Jaurès, and we're relying on a free software, but which doesn't work. So it's a bit of a problem, really. It's really frustrating, and I'm really actually grateful that you should have been able to do your presentation with changes that you had to bring at the last minute. So I'm sure that despite these technical obstacles, there'll be questions for your very interesting presentation. So do we have any questions from the floor? If not, I may maybe start with a question. I'm no expert when it comes to grime music, but David, do you have a question yourself that you would like to ask?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. Yes, I do have a question, but please proceed, Vincent, and I'll take over once you're done.
Okay, no problem at all. So I'll ask a question, and then my question is actually, has to do with the current political context in the UK. And I wanted to know in what ways has the resurgence of the far right in the UK shaped the political consciousness and creative expression of grime artists and their audience, in recent months? Is that something that has changed in recent months? Have they responded? You mentioned Brexit, you mentioned racism, but what about the rise of the far right, raise the colors, the pink ladies, and all the like? Thank you.
So grime artists, and I feel as many artists nowadays, are a bit less vocal about some issues, because I think, but I cannot really speak in their place, but I think there is a fear of being cancelled and of losing a growingly mainstream audience. But they still lead initiatives, not necessarily through their music, but they rappers like Stormzy has a foundation, and he gives scholarships to Black British students to go study at Cambridge. But in their music, there's also the question of what sells and what's commercially viable. So there's a bit less political involvement nowadays. But as I said, in Dave's latest album, there's a real resurgence of these social and political claims. And I was very pleasantly surprised when I listened to it, because I feel like they've lost that political involvement, and he proves that it's not, entirely lost.
Thank you. And I've got a related question, just a quick one. Have they specifically been the targets of the far right in any way, or is the far right indifferent to Grime?
No, the far right is not, but unfortunately, it's not just the far right. Even prime ministers like David Cameron, who is not far right, has targeted Grime in the past when he was prime minister. So yeah, Grime has been targeted, but more in the early 2000s to early 2010s, because there was a strong association between Grime and gang culture by the media and by political personalities such as David Cameron. So it's not, unfortunately, not only the far right.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. David, you had a question?
Yes, great. Thank you very much, Juliette, for this presentation. My questions actually follow on from what Vincent just asked. I know much better the previous generation of Black British artists from the 70s and the 80s. What I know about the current generation is that the literature has sort of an ambivalent portrayal as either this kind of underground, radical, revolutionary scene, or on the other hand, is like sort of mass consumerism or escapism as well. I mean, you read it often from older guys, older people like me, that, this is just music to relax, to forget about your problems, which, well, I don't think it's entirely valid, but yeah, given the context also that Vincent highlighted, that left-wing forms of militant activism have overall decreased, if not disappeared, compared to what they used to be a few decades ago. Do you think that these musical scenes are actually effective at mobilizing British youth from, let's say, a working class background, an underprivileged background, and do they inaugurate sort of a new era? So that's also, sorry, it's a long question, but that's also something we find in the literature a lot, that is this sort of kind of more low-key, sorry for the pun not intended, low-key sort of banal form of civic participation, basically like through music, through going out in clubs and things like that. Do you think that's actually occurring, or is it just something people wish was occurring and is not really? What's your assessment of the efficacy of this scene, to simplify? Thank you.
I think both conceptions are true. So Grime as a real platform for political involvement is true, and Grime as escapism and consumerism, it's also true, depending on the artists, depending on the album that's released. But I'm really convinced that it does have an impact. And for example, in 2017, there was a movement led by Grime artists to support Jeremy Corbyn during his run-up to the general election. And it cannot be proven that it's entirely thanks to Grime. But the aim of the movement, which was called Grime for Corbyn, was to convince youths to register to vote. And that year, the turnout was it really did have an impact. And Corbyn was not supposed to gain as many seats as he did. And some of that can be attributed to the participation of Grime artists who do have a real influence. And in the world we live in today, famous people and famous artists do have an influence over the people who listen to them. So yeah, I really think when they get involved and when they raise their voices about some issues, they do have an impact, even for the general election of 2017. But more recently, there were many protests organized by Lowkey with Jeremy Corbyn as well. And I think the merging of traditional political spheres and music really does have an impact over youth turnout in demonstrations, elections. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. If I just may ask a follow-up question, and how represent, because these are all questions I ask myself, by the way. It's not like how representative are these more political artists of the, let's say, black music scene in Britain today? Are they my impression, but it's an impression, is that maybe they are less prominent than they used to be a few decades ago, but I don't know. I don't have the same knowledge as you. So what do you think is their role and prominence in the popular music in general, let's say?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that, because Dave, for example, he released an album a week ago. It's the second best start of a British rapper in the history of British rap. And all the songs in the album have political references, social references. So he's, I would say he's one of the most, if not the most famous rapper in the UK right now. Stormzy as well, who's one of the UK's superstars and who comes from Grime, also raises social and political issues in his songs. Skepta as well. So they are really, really famous artists and really successful artists who are still involved and have an influence over their audiences. Yeah. So I don't think, it depends on their song. Even one, I talked about Stormzy, for example. Stormzy will have songs where he does not make any reference to a social or political issue, and it will just be, as you said, escapism or club song or music to dance to. And then he will write songs in other albums or in the same albums, way deeper. And it's just a mix of both. And I think that's how they manage to stay at the top of the scene, because they can do both. So yeah, I don't think it prevents them from being successful.
Good. Well, thanks for your response. I believe we have a question from someone called Printania, who's raised a hand, or their hand. So
yes, hello. Yes, hello. So my name is Printania. I'm also a student in the master degree in Sorbonne Nouvelle. So thank you a lot for your presentation. I'm sorry I was late. I didn't catch everything, but it was really interesting. And I am being supervised by Romain Garbet, as my research will be on drill music, so kind of like after Grime. And yeah, I had a question which is also a mix of all the questions that has already been asked. It's about more like the reception, like of the public. So the fact that, for example, Stormzy, he came from a working class background, and that's why he made his music. His music originally, like every rapper, used to be about social realities that he been through. and that how does like people used to rely on him because they had the same lives as him, but I was wondering how could people still rely on this kind of person now that with the industrialization of music, and the fact that now rappers can really get rich thanks to their music, and these rappers, they don't have the same social realities as the people that listens to them. And I was just wondering um, how the public still rely and relate to this kind of artist. And I would also wanted to talk about a bit of the boycotts about Stormzy, because I saw recently, I don't know if you've seen it also, but I saw that some of his, it was kind of a long time ago, maybe 2 years ago, some of his.
If we're talking about the same thing, it was like a year ago. But...
Okay, because it kind of also links with what you said about grime being depoliticized, and the fact that now money is more important to artists than politics. And Stormzy were criticized about that because of his collaboration with McDonald's, and a lot of pro-Palestinian activists that listens to his music were really disappointed and did not want to listen to his music anymore, call him a traitor and stuff like that. And I was just wondering how, people kind of feel they don't relate to these rappers anymore, also linked with the industrialization of music, or does the public not really care because of what you talked about, escapism, and the fact that grime is also not entirely political, and sometimes you just want to dance, or does the public really want something political? I was just wondering.
So that's extremely interesting, because I just wrote a chapter of my PhD about honesty and authenticity balanced with success during Grime's second wave. So what I would say is, obviously, if they become successful, they are not working class anymore because they reached financial success. So they are not as much part of these communities as they used to. But I think there's a way to balance this success and authenticity. And you took Stormzy as an example, and I don't think he's the best example if we want to show how grime artists succeeded in still representing their communities in their music, strictly speaking. So yes, Stormzy has been boycotted since he deleted posts about Palestine and announced a collaboration with McDonald's. But even before that, Stormzy released some songs, in my opinion, and I want to make clear that I'm not from these communities, and I have points of view that may not be the same one as people who felt represented by Stormzy and don't anymore. But what I could say, and what I've developed in my research, is that Stormzy, in my opinion, did not really succeed in balancing his success and still staying true, if I may, to his roots and to his communities. But some other artists did it really well. Skepta, for example, who's extremely successful as well, who has a clothing brand, his music is extremely known. He's like an international superstar. And in his songs, he acknowledges his success, and he does not pretend he's still from he's still working class, So I think there is a way to balance it, and some artists succeed in balancing their success and the mainstream audience and everything with staying authentic in their music, and some, like Stormzy, struggle a bit more, I feel. But in Stormzy's defense, as I said during my presentation or in my introduction, he still does things not necessarily in his music, but he has a foundation that provides scholarships for Black students to go study at Cambridge. So he does still, like, he still gives to charities and he still leads initiatives, but yeah, it could be done better. And I think it's a really hard balance to find between financial success, because that's what they want when they start making music. They want to represent their communities, but they also want to move up the social ladder. And I think it's hard to balance this success and staying authentic. And yeah, so I think some artists succeed in doing that. Dave, for example, I really recommend you listen to his last album, because I think he really succeeds in, staying honest, authentic, and still having social and political claims. And some artists struggle a bit more. I don't know if that answers both your questions. I think it does.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
A question from David Bousquet again.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to do all this the questions here. It's just a brief comment about the exchange that just occurred, because that to me is super interesting, but also I think in a scientific perspective, these are often binaries that we apply to these artists, or that we find applied to these artists in the press, by politicians and stuff like that, but that not necessarily productive from a scientific point of view, I would say, because in fact, if I can give now my opinion, is that these artists are both political and consumerist. And I think if we want to really truly understand what these mass, because these are, as you highlighted before, Juliette, what these mass musical scenes mean, in fact, we need to hold the two in balance, and we need to account for them in the way that is both underground and mainstream, both political and consumerist, and so on and so forth. And I think this also what makes them appealing to some extent, because if it was pure politics, nobody would listen to them more, and there's not as many people. So it's the fact that it's entertainment. I think this idea that entertainment detracts from political value or political meaning, to me as a scientist in the field, is not a valid idea. I think we have forms of entertainment that provide also, that convey a political message, and I think that applies quite well to your topic, which is kind of similar to mine. So hence my comment. Sorry, I will now shut up forever and leave it up to others to discuss the topic.
But I just wanted to say I agree with that. And also, these artists, when they started making music, they have a will of financial emancipation. They have social claims, but it's still within the scope of capitalism, so they cannot reach financial success outside of capitalism, because that's not possible right now. So yeah, it has to be mentioned, but also about their political engagement and entertainment and everything. I think people who listen to music want the people they listen to have political positions and to voice their opinions about some political matters and social matters more and more. I think we want to see if the people we listen to agree with us more and more. So it might not be the most interesting thing from a scientific point of view, but that's also a reality when the audiences want more and more for the artists they listen to raise their voices about social and political issues.
Good. I think we have a question from Romain Garban.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. Thank you, David. Thank you, Juliette, most of all. And thank you, Printania, for being here. Very nice, well done of you, Printania, for being here today. I have a lot of remarks and comments and questions, but I'm going to keep it short because, as Juliette knows, I could go on for hours about that. And Britannia, as you will soon learn, I could go on for hours. And as Vincent and David know, I could go on for hours. But anyway, I think the discussion has been great so far. And thank you, Juliette, for a great presentation as well. As you know, I'm deeply interested and involved in those subjects. And I think one of the key remarks that's been done by David, thank you, David, for making a remark, is that the music of grime is both political and commercial. And that's one of the things that interests me the most, one of the many things that interest me the most in grime music and in drill and in other styles of pop music contemporarily in Britain generally. And I really want to insist on that. It's the question of, yes, Juliette, it's all about politics, but it's also about selling records. And the reason why it's about selling records is because it's typically working class culture, is that you want to make it, you want to make money, which makes perfect sense, which is perfectly legitimate. It's not a problem of morals or anything. It's a problem of when you're working class, by the way, probably, and that's a difficult subject, probably in the same way that you're middle class, you just want to make money. So grime and probably Printania, by the way, drill is also about making money.
Yeah.
And so citizenship and social commentary or social chronicle or social critic is very, very linked to trying to make money. And so you've both got to be very centered in your research on not try to distinguish the two, because they're analytical distinctions that we make when we're academics. But when you're writing, you've got to forget about that. It doesn't matter whether it's about promoting citizenship and talking about social marginalization, or talking about national identity, or talking about being against the monarchy or whatever. It's also about making money, and it doesn't matter. It's the same. And that goes back to the punk culture. I think what's missing in your discussion is that there's this huge link, and I'm not the only one saying that. This is being written all over musical sociology in Britain. There's a continuity. This is what's great about your work, about grime and about drill. It's all about continuity. Of course, your work is part of a study of the Black transatlantic American culture, as in the work of Paul Gilroy and others. But it's also part of the history of the punk movement in Britain, which is all about class conflict and socioeconomic inequality. And so you've got to make sure that you manage to, in your writings, talk about blackness and Black transatlantic solidarity between different Black movements in North America and Jamaica and Britain and so on, and also about purely British punk, not punk music, obviously, but punk ethos, which is all about socioeconomic inequality.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very linked, and hearing everything you've just said, I think you will like the chapter I sent you, because that's all about financial success and grime success within capitalism and social and political involvement as conviction, but also because it works and because it sells, and it's just, that's how it is. And I completely agree that it cannot be separated. Yeah, I agree.
You've got to be able to deal with that much more, because it's all about making, just as the punks in the 70s, the grime movement in the 2010s, 2020s, or from 2000s, 2010s, 2020, is all about being successful, quote unquote successful, whatever it means. being, visible in the media, or making money, or being recognized, being, recognized as a success in your family by your grandma and your father and your mother and whatever, and your friends. It's all about being successful. That's what music is about. And that's what art is about. Generally, Mozart and Picasso all wanted to be successful. And you guys, you Juliette, and you Printania, and everyone has to, that's a key theme in the sociology of music. When you look at the key writers in sociology of music, like of pop music, contemporary pop music, like Simon Frith, Dick Hebdige, it's all about the very intimate interlinkage between, self-expression, caring about the community, talking about the community, and making it big, becoming someone. It's all very narcissistic as well. It's all, and making money. It's all interlinked. And that's what art is about. That's what makes art, that's what makes studying art different from studying just politics or just studying economics. It's all about narcissism, talking about, things that are beyond us all, like spirituality, but it's also about talking about community and talking about politics, and it's all interlinked. And you've got to make sure, and that's what your plight is. That's what your undertaking is as scholars of an art form, is to make sure that you manage in your writing to carry all of that. And it's I know I'm placing the bar very high, obviously, but I'm not saying you should succeed, because nobody can succeed in that. Even the when I'm talking to you, I'm thinking of writers like Simon Frith or Dick Hebdige or Stuart Hall, who plays the bar very high, sorry, or Paul Gilroy. But it's to aim at. That's what you need to have in the back of your mind when you're writing.
I agree, but about success and being successful and narcissistic, I'm not sure it's always the case, to be honest. I know it's still a market, and if someone wants to be able to make a living with their music, they have to be successful. But I talked a lot about Lowkey, and for example, I'm really convinced there's no being successful is not that important, because if it were, he wouldn't have spoken up about so many things he has spoken up about. So if it was only about being successful, he did not make smart choices in his career. And the fact that he did make these choices proves that it's also about being, how can I put it, about representation and about involvement and about activism. For him, as an example, more than being successful, I think. And for most artists, I agree, but I don't think it's always the case, because I'm really convinced some people use art not necessarily to make a living, but also to be an activist through art. And for some people, I really think it's the main motivation. And I just read what you wrote, David, and I agree. It's just, I completely agree that when you come from a minority, Black or ethnic minority or a woman, and you're successful, you're given the task of representing the minority you come from. And I agree that should not be the case. But in the case of Grime community, is a really important and founding aspect of the genre, and it's a revendication almost of the artists that they represent their communities. That's just what I wanted to add. But I agree that generally artists from minorities are given the role of representing their communities, even when that's not why they make their music.
Yeah, it's also, sorry, I'm speaking again, the question of not essentializing community. Like, community is anything you make it to be, to some extent.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I mean, these artists also contribute to shaping communities in certain ways. And that's a process that's constantly happening through different influences and processes and so on. And hopefully through, more progressive, radical voices, then things can evolve in more progressive ways as well. But it's not static, or that's my main point of criticism with this question of the burden of representation, is that you're not representing something stable, fixed, or and it also goes the other way around, because British national identity, it's not
I agree.
white Protestant or whatever it is, thought to be by the hardcore nationalists either. So
and that's one of the main points of my PhD, is that grime is a part of British culture. It's not just a subculture, it's part of a wider national culture.
Yeah, I agree with that. No, I agree with that. I think grime has become, in the last 10, 15 years, something that's, I'm going to say, key to British understandings of national identity, but something that's part of it, definitely. Yeah. Like other trends in pop British culture and contemporary, like post-punk, for example. There's other things, but grime is definitely something that's out there, that has an impact. Definitely. Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you're all aware of female grime artists that are very interesting, like Lady LeSure. Do you know Lady LeSure, Queen's Speech, episode number 4?
Yeah, in the chapter of my PhD, I wrote about political involvement. So the chapter from which that presentation is taken, I do talk about that song and this artist. Yeah.
Good. So have I read the chapter before?
Yes.
Well, there you go.
It's one of the first chapters I wrote, so it was a while ago.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't remember it, but I think Lady LeSure is great. And also Lady Sovereign. Are you aware of Lady Sovereign?
Yes, I wrote about her as well.
Because my feeling, Juliette, is that you have a very male-centric
because
vision.
grime is male-centric and rap is male-centric, but whenever there's a female artist, I do mention, even if it's not, I write a chapter about women in grime, but also in different chapters, I mentioned Little Sims and yes, Lady LeSure and Lady Sovereign. I do mention these artists. It's just that it's a male-dominated scene, so
yeah. I know. Yeah. I'm aware of that, but I honestly I didn't pick up on your mentioning. It must be very minor, because I didn't mention of your mentioning of Lady LeSure and Lady Sovereign, but I think they're great. And don't worry, it's no problem about your PhD. If it doesn't pay so much attention about them, that's okay. It's still interesting. It's very interesting.
I'm gonna write an entire chapter about women in grime, so that's also maybe why I don't really develop it as much in other chapters, because I want to have things to say.
I know. I'm still waiting on that, but I'm sorry about other participants in the seminar, but this is a bit of a dialogue between Junior and I. But Juliette, so far, what I've grasped about your PhD as a supervisor is that you were interested in women in grime. That's been very clear from the start. But from what I grasped, now forgive me if I'm wrong, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt that you were mostly interested in women who were managers of grime male artists rather than female artists. You've never talked to me very much about female artists at all.
Oh, no, it's female artists. I did talk about Little Sims, about Lady LeSure, but yeah, I'm really interested in female artists, not managers. Not. This chapter will be about female artists and the way women are talked about in grime songs.
Okay, well, that's great. Yeah. Well, okay, talked about, but I think they have a great voice. Yeah. Lady Sovereign and Lady LeSure, but there's a couple of others as well. I think they're brilliant.
Yeah,
I think
I agree.
So you need to talk about them. But anyway, sorry for all the others, but Printania, Vincent, and David.
Well, maybe we have other questions from the floor. We're going to ask people if they have any questions and remarks following Juliette's very interesting and enlightening presentation. Because I had a really vague idea about Grime, and I feel I know much better now and much more now than I used to. So if we have no other questions, maybe it's time, unless Romain and David would like to add something, or Juliette, is there anything you'd like to add to?
No, maybe before we end, I can just send the links of the videos I wanted to show in the conversation so that everyone can.
That's very good.
Yeah,
so
great.
I'll do that right now.
Yeah, and we'll make sure the well, we'll see. Yeah, thank you. You can copy and paste. Yeah, that's very good. Everyone, if you're interested. And
can I just add, Vincent, please, that because I don't know if I missed the first minute. I don't know if you said it, but we were honored to publish with your good self, Vincent and Romain, an issue of the area academic journal, which features a very interesting article by Juliette Issartel, and it's on open access online. So maybe you can also share the link to that. And that's a part of an issue on cultural diversity and popular music in the UK. So well done on that, Juliette.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
And what I wanted to add is that concerning the upcoming MIDIB events, there will be a conference sponsored by MIDIB in Dijon. So maybe you would like to say something about that, David, entitled Immigration in Debate, Migratory Experiences, Civic Engagement and Political Discourse, which is not strictly based on the British Isles, but which will also comprise papers on, I think, Latin America, notably. And this is taking place online, so you can all attend, and it'll be on the 30th of January 2026, I think, all day.
Yes, exactly. So it's European mostly, about immigration in Europe in general, with quite a few papers on the UK. We will circulate the information through the MIDIB network, through CRISIB, SOS, and all that. So yes, on 30th of January, so online, everyone is welcome. And I've just pasted the link to the issue of area in the chat as well. And Romain did it as well at the same time. So
and I was about to do it as well, but
maybe 3 times. Yeah, it's very interesting issue. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but it's very interesting. And we'll be in touch over the next few weeks to let you know about the program of semester 2. We have already 2 sessions lined up, 2 very important sessions, I think, and we'll keep you posted about that soon, right? And we'll keep you soon posted as well about the recording and the availability of the recording, because as I said once more, Big Blue Button is new to us, and got to find ways of making the videos available, right? So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And see you all very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.